What if the ancient world was never as primitive as we were taught? Researchers recently ran a computational analysis over ancient Sanskrit manuscripts, treating 3,000-year-old descriptions of flying machines as technical documents instead of poetry. What came back was not proof of ancient aircraft. It was something stranger, materials that match nothing in any modern database, and details too specific for scholars to keep dismissing as myth. In this video, we go through exactly what that analysis found, and the one scholar who tried to raise these same questions decades before any computer could check his work. Composed somewhere between 1500 and 1200 BCE, the Rig Veda is one of the oldest religious texts on Earth. Buried inside its hymns are descriptions of vehicles called Vimanas, chariots of the gods, moving through the sky at will. For centuries, this reading has gone unchallenged. Divine beings fly. That is what divinity does. The language is poetic, symbolic, exactly what you would expect from a civilization describing its gods in the grandest terms available to it. Scholars trained in comparative mythology point to similar language across nearly every ancient religious tradition. Sky chariots, flying thrones, gods who move between heaven and earth without effort. There is nothing unusual about a religion giving its divine figures the power of flight. That reading holds up, here at least. But the Rig Veda is only the beginning of the story, and the two great epics that follow do not stop at symbolism. In the Ramayana, the Vimana stops being a vague vehicle of the gods and becomes something else entirely, a named, specific machine. The Pushpaka, owned first by the demon king, Ravana, later claimed by the hero Rama. Rooms, seating arrangements, gardens growing inside it, the ability to move in any direction, to change speed and altitude, powered by nothing, no animal, no human hand pulling it forward. Self-propelled. The text describes passengers boarding and disembarking, describes the craft resting on the ground between journeys, describes its interior, the way you would describe a building, rather than a beam of divine light. Gods do not typically need architecture. A vehicle with a floor plan is not a metaphor for divine radiance. It is a description of a place someone can walk through. And the deeper into the Sanskrit epics you go, the harder that description becomes to write off. The Mahabharata takes the Pushpaka's peaceful architecture and turns it into a weapon. Flying vehicles carrying arms. Craft moving at speeds the text struggles to compare to anything else available to its author. Aerial engagements described in enough detail that some passages read less like myth and more like an eyewitness account of a bombing run. A god's chariot needs no tactics. It needs no weapons systems, no flight formations, no description of how the attack unfolds from above. The Mahabharata gives all three. It gives formations of craft moving together, coordinated strikes, and moments where a Vimana is disabled mid-flight and falls. A detail that assumes the machine can fail, which is not a property anyone assigns to a god, which raises a dangerous question. If the Rig Veda's Vimanas are metaphors and the Ramayana's Pushpaka is unusually specific, what do you call a text describing aerial warfare down to the mechanics of the assault? The obvious objection to all of this is a fair one. If Vimanas were real machines, where is the physical evidence? Ancient India was not a civilization that built things that vanished without a trace. The Iron Pillar of Delhi has stood in open air for over 1,600 years without rusting through, a metallurgical feat modern engineers still study to fully explain. The stepwells of Gujarat, carved deep into rock, remain structurally intact after 1,000 years. When ancient India built something to last, it lasted. That is precisely what makes the Vimana texts different, and precisely what Raghavan pointed to decades before anyone thought to check it, computationally. The materials specified for Vimana construction are never described in the language used for stone, iron, or bronze. They are described as light, responsive to air and heat, closer to treated wood or plant resin than to metal. If the texts are accurate, the absence of surviving wreckage is not a mystery. It is exactly what should be expected. A civilization capable of iron pillars that do not rust could also, in principle, have built something that was never meant to survive 1,000 years in the ground. The most detailed Vimana text of all is also the most awkward to defend. The Vaimanika Shastra was reportedly transcribed between 1904 and 1923 by a Sanskrit scholar named Pandit Subbaraya Shastri, who claimed the material came to him through channeling, received, not authored. That origin story is precisely the kind of detail that ends a serious conversation before it starts. A manuscript produced through a claimed psychic episode in the early 20th century is not archaeological evidence of anything ancient. Most Sanskrit scholars who have addressed the text at all do so briefly, and only to explain why it falls outside their field entirely. And yet, the technical content inside it does not resemble anything an early 1900s Sanskrit scholar with no engineering training had any obvious way of inventing. Propulsion principles absent from any aviation science of the period. Materials with properties nobody has been able to match. Navigation methods with no analog in astronomy were taught in India at the time. Whatever Shastri was drawing from, it was not the aviation science of his own century, a century that had only just seen its first powered flight at Kitty Hawk. In 1974, a team of aeronautical engineers at the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore ran a formal technical review of the Vaimanika Shastra's designs. Their conclusion has been repeated for 50 years as a clean debunking. The aircraft, as described, could not fly under any conventional aerodynamic principle. The wings do not generate sufficient lift. The proportions do not hold up under standard aerodynamic modeling. By the ordinary rules of flight, the designs fail. That is where most retellings stop. The full report does not. Buried in the same analysis is a detail almost nobody quotes. The text specifies 17 distinct materials required for construction. Named, described, given specific properties, weights, and reactions to heat and pressure. The 1974 engineers could not match a single one to anything in the materials science of their time. That detail sat unexamined for decades until a recent AI-assisted pass through the manuscript cross-referenced all 17 names and their described properties against modern materials, science databases, chemical composition records, engineering catalogs, everything cataloged and searchable today that was not available in 1974. The result did not change. 17 substances, named with precision, matching nothing that has ever been cataloged, synthesized, or discovered. The same analysis turned to the text's navigation instructions, which raise a separate and stranger problem. The Vaimanika Shastra describes guiding a craft using what translates roughly as sensitivity to unseen atmospheric or cosmic forces. The analysis flagged this description as consistent in structure with navigation by way of the Earth's magnetic field, a concept with no known place in the historical record of ancient Indian astronomy, which tracked the stars, the sun, and the calendar, but left no known account of magnetism as a directional tool. The analysis was careful on this point, and it is worth being equally careful here. A structural resemblance between an ancient description and a modern concept is not evidence that the ancient author understood magnetism. Vague enough language can resemble almost anything if you look hard enough. What made this flag worth noting is the specificity of the surrounding text. This was not one vague phrase, but part of a document that also specifies altitude ceilings, seasonal performance limits, and conditions under which the craft simply will not function. A god's chariot has no seasons. It cannot fly in. An engineered object does. Not every serious academic dismissed the Vimana texts. Dr. V. Raghavan, a Sanskrit scholar at the University of Madras, was no fringe figure. He held the Padma Bhushan, one of India's highest civilian honors, for his contributions to Sanskrit scholarship. His career was built on textual rigor, not speculation. In 1974, at the Indian National Science Academy's Symposium on Ancient Indian Science, Raghavan argued something his colleagues did not want to hear: that the Vimana descriptions were too specific, too technically consistent to be pure invention. He proposed that some form of advanced aerial knowledge may have once existed in ancient India, gradually folded into myth and religious narrative as the original technical understanding faded from memory over centuries of retelling. The backlash was immediate. No wreckage, no manufacturing sites, no mention from any contemporary civilization of Indian flying machines, despite extensive trade and travel between ancient India and the Mediterranean, Persia, and East Asia. If Vimanas existed, critics argued, someone outside India would have written about seeing one. Raghavan's answer to that objection was specific, and it is the same answer that resurfaces every time this subject comes up. The materials described in the texts are organic, composite, exactly the kind of substance that would not survive thousands of years in the ground. Wood decays, plant resin decays. Even the unidentified 17 materials from the Vaimanika Shastra are described in terms that suggest biological or composite origin rather than metal. Absence of evidence, he argued, was not evidence of absence. It was exactly what you would expect if the underlying materials were never built to outlast their builders. He died in 1979. The debate died with him, unresolved rather than settled, filed away by a discipline that had moved on to other questions. Which raises a question nobody has answered since. What happens when you rerun his argument with the analytical tools he never had access to? Among everything the Vaimanika Shastra describes, one passage draws more attention from engineers than any other: the mercury vortex engine. The text describes heated mercury, spun in a precise circular pattern inside a sealed container, generating an upward force. Specific spin direction, specific temperature, specific geometry, down to the shape and proportions of the container itself. Gods do not need engines. A divine chariot that flies because its rider is divine has no reason to specify a propulsion mechanism at all, and certainly not one this granular, with failure conditions and operating parameters attached to it. The presence of an engine design inside a religious epic is, on its own, strange. Stranger still, spinning mercury under certain conditions does produce measurable electromagnetic effects. This is documented uncontroversial modern physics, studied in laboratory settings that have nothing to do with ancient India. Whether spinning mercury can generate enough force to lift a vehicle remains unproven and likely conflicts with known aerodynamics. No working demonstration of mercury-based lift exists anywhere. But identifying Mercury's unusual electromagnetic behavior at all, centuries before anyone understood electromagnetism, as a field of study, is not something easily explained by poetic invention. Nothing about mercury's appearance, heavy silver liquid at room temperature, suggests to an untrained observer that spinning it would do anything unusual at all. The strangest passages in the Mahabharata are not the battles. They are the ones describing Vimanas, traveling beyond the sky entirely, into realms with no air, no familiar ground beneath them, no landmarks an ancient observer standing on the earth could have described from first-hand experience. Mainstream scholarship reads this as cosmological myth, a journey between symbolic divine planes with no physical meaning, the same way any culture's heaven and underworld cosmology is read as symbolic rather than literal geography. That reading fits most of the text. When the same computational analysis worked through these passages, it flagged a handful of lines where the language shifts from clearly mythological to unexpectedly observational. The sky changing color with altitude, the difficulty of breathing at great height, and one passage, quoted far less often than it should be, describing the earth as appearing round and bounded, viewed from very far above. The earth appearing round from a height is a correct observation. It is not one that was widely established in Indian astronomical texts of the same period, and it is not something a writer, describing a purely symbolic heavenly journey, has any reason to get right. The analysis flagged this single passage as the most difficult of all to explain through invention alone. Not because it proves anything, but because a civilization writing pure myth does not typically need its myths to be accurate about the shape of the planet from orbit. And the deeper you sit with that detail, the stranger the whole passage becomes. An observational fact, sitting inside a story that had no reason to get it right, and every reason, if it were pure invention, to get it wrong. There is a broader question sitting underneath all of this, and it has nothing to do with mercury engines or magnetic navigation specifically. Ancient Indian civilization was not a primitive one, reaching for stories beyond its ability. Sanskrit texts document an early formulation of the value of pi, an advanced grasp of algebra centuries before it reached Europe, and astronomical calculations precise enough to track eclipses and planetary movement with real accuracy. This was a civilization capable of sophisticated abstract thought and careful, exacting record-keeping. A civilization like that does not typically need to invent flying machines to make its religious literature compelling. Its gods could fly by virtue of being gods, the same way every other ancient religion's gods did, with no engine specifications, no 17 materials, no altitude ceilings required. The technical detail is the anomaly. Nobody has fully explained why it is there. Sanskrit manuscript collections across Indian universities are still being digitized, slowly, one archive at a time, and the majority of the most technically detailed Vimana material has never been subjected to the kind of systematic cross-referencing described here. Most of it still sits untouched in reading rooms, studied by a small number of specialists, waiting for a level of scrutiny it has not yet received. What happens when the rest of it finally gets that scrutiny is still an open question. Raghavan did not live to see the tools that could test his argument. Whether the next pass through these manuscripts settles the question or only deepens it is not something any of us can answer yet.